Hello, welcome to another STEM story. Today we're speaking to Sophie Hussey, who is a service management and technology leadership consultant, which is, I imagine, one of those jobs that you need the job description to have a full picture of what happens in there. Thank you very much,
Yes, a bit.
Sophie. Can you tell us a little bit about what does your role involve?
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, the job title is quite broad for a reason, just because there's so many things that I do, so many facets to what I do. So when you're talking about the service management consultancy side of stuff, basically what I'm doing is I'm advising and supporting businesses on how they deliver their tech services. So to make it a little bit relatable, if you're using your phone and you're using an app on your phone, and if that app fails, it's my job to make sure that people know how to handle the process in the background if it fails. So how do they fix it? How do they do updates to it? And things like making sure that it's usable and people can actually enjoy the service that they're using. Um, so it's all about, it can sound a little bit dumb, but it's actually quite fun. You get to work with lots of different people. You sort of making sure that people are doing things in the right way, or they're considering other humans in the way that they're delivering their technology services. And then the leadership side of stuff, I basically sort of do a bit of mentoring, bit of coaching, although I'm not a qualified coach, but I help leaders understand how to lead and how they can develop their teams.
Hmm.
So I might go into an organization and say, how are things set up? What is it you're wanting to achieve? And they might say that they want to do all of this sort of growth and deliver various bits and pieces. And I'll say, right, in order to do that, you need to understand the talent in your teams. You need to bring in new people, do things like apprenticeships, and get sort of innovative skills from the younger generations, as well as utilize what you've got in house. And I'll help them define how they sort of set up their IT teams, but also sort of their strategy and the plan that they're going to follow in order to deliver that. Um, there's a whole heap of stuff in between that. Um, that if I were to explain it, we would be here forever. But it's a lot of fun. Pretty much the way I typically describe what I do is it's kind of like customer services for technology, but with so much more. But making sure that people are sort of leading with empathy and putting the humans that they deal with in the forefront of everything they do.
Brilliant. That must be really interesting because I can't imagine there's often much repetition in your days.
Well, yeah, pretty much. There are things that follow me everywhere I go, but when something breaks, it's never the same thing, or it should never be the same thing. But the joy of, because I work for myself, I get to work with all sorts of different companies, all sorts of different people, like very, very diverse individuals, and it makes it fun. And I don't just work with people in the UK, I work with people around the world as well. So I'm sort of learning new cultures, new ways of working as well. It definitely doesn't get boring,
Yeah.
and it keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, this is something I didn't entirely appreciate when I first started my first proper job, that I was learning all of the science and the processes and the lab skills from the staff that were already there, the mentors, the people that had been there a while.
Mhm.
But then when it came to how do we present this, how no one can get the laptop to work in the meeting room, they'd bring me in. We're like, can you plug this in? Like, this is what we did at university all the time. What are we talking about? No, it's the other way around. This is the importance of
Yes,
having yourself an apprentice.
absolutely. There's things that the younger people that I work with show me how to do. I'm like, I should know that. I should know that. I've been working in tech for a long time. Yeah, I didn't think about that. But the age-old reboot always helps.
Yeah.
Turning it off and on again.
Oh yeah. We used to have a lab engineer, and before he'd even get off his desk, he'd be like, "Have you turned it off and on again?" All right. It works. 75% of the time it works. I love it. What was it that led you into that path?
Um, well, nothing that I've done career-wise has been on purpose. Well, apart from starting my own business, that I definitely did on purpose.
Yeah.
So when we talk about sort of service management, and it's like the softer side of tech, there's no coding involved. I don't do any kind of pressing of any buttons and anything sort of technical in that respect anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. But when you're talking about it, it's all kind of like best practice stuff. And what I've discovered is in my previous permanent roles that I took before I started working for myself, I had been doing what is considered best practice service management without realizing it, because it's kind of just common sense, right? A lot of the stuff I do, it's not rocket science. It's just making sure that you're talking to people and you consider everything that you're doing in kind of almost like a logical approach. And actually, what jumped me into service management was I got made redundant from my technical job, and a career opportunity. For me, it was great. Both times I've been made redundant, it's been an opportunity to do something else. And I was offered to do a job in service management where I could step away from the techie, which honestly for me, because I'm not a natural techie, I was glad to step away. But it gave me the opportunity to learn something else and work at a different level that I hadn't been. And I think I've been doing it officially for must be about 13 years now in my part of tech, and it's brilliant. But I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened. Same as when I got into tech in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. We feel like we're following some intentional path, and then all of a sudden we're like, how did I end up? Oh, it's all worked out.
Well, I think that's the thing with me, is that I'm not somebody that's got a vocation. I've never been somebody that says, I'm going to do such and such. My eldest daughter knows that she wants to be a solicitor or a barrister, and she has done since she was probably about 8 or 9.
Oh, wow.
I'm not that person. I'm somebody that's like, I don't know what job I want to do. Let's see what happens. And each time I've progressed through my career, it's been through opportunity or, oh, actually, I quite like this thing. So I'm a bit of a generalist. And I think one of the things that I'm quite passionate about talking about is the fact that not everybody does have that vocation. And sometimes you do just fall into a career path, but then it's what skills and stuff you can learn as you're going through that can help you do your next thing. Quite often in sort of interview situations, people will say to you, where do you want to be in 5 years? My answer is, I have no idea, because it depends on what's going to happen between now and then. But I do know what sort of things I want to do to develop myself and grow and learn more things, and which bits are exciting, which bits I kind of want to leave behind, and sort of not making it up as I go along, but accepting that there are some of us who aren't born to do a specific role.
Yeah, I love it. It's not like the picture that you get like when you're at preschool. They'll say, what would you like to be when you grow up? And they'll say, doctor, policeman, lawyer, fireman, scientist, vet. And those aren't actually really jobs. I mean, there are a lot of policemen and doctors, but even within that, there's different types of policemen and different types of doctors. And there's people that learn science and work at a desk, and there's people that learn science and go into space.
Absolutely. Yeah, so many different flavors of things. I think probably if I'd been asked that question at school, that I would have just said, can I eat cake? And I'd been happy with that.
Yeah, that probably would have been me too. Do you feel like there's any, so it sounds like a lot of the choices that you made were based on the circumstance of the time and kind of what things were what you were enjoying, what was motivating you. Is there anything that you might do differently if you went back and went through the journey again?
Yes. I think knowing what I know now, I either would have done a different degree at university, or I might not have gone. I think I enjoyed my time at university, but I picked a degree that was so generic because I didn't know what else to do, because I'm not somebody with that vocation, like I just said. I think it would have been useful to have done a computer science degree rather than a business and management one. And I think there's choices that I've made as I've gone through my career where, looking back, maybe I should have pushed harder for the next promotion, or maybe I wouldn't have stayed as a technical person for as long as I did. But I think the one thing that's really kind of in my face right now is I've been working for myself for 2.5 years, and I wish I'd done it sooner. Because I absolutely love it. I mean, I love being a permanent employee as well. But I get to work with so many different people, and I get to see different implementations of tech and different approaches to service management with each client I work with. And I kind of wish I'd done that sooner, because it's not that I didn't have fun before, but I have way more fun now than I had before. I probably would have left being a techie sooner as well.
Yeah.
I think just it's not natural to me. I think before we started recording, I'd mentioned that when I went to university, that was the first time I used a computer. Literally, besides the odd time I sneakily used my brother's Spectrum 64, because I'm very old, which was just to play games. I remember my first day at university turning to the person next to me, how do I use this thing called email? Because I don't know what it is, and I didn't even know how to set up an email address. And I think because of that, I then had to try even harder than the people that had done the computer science degrees to learn the technical route that I'd followed. But at the same time, it got to a point where I wasn't as interested in learning new tech. I was more interested in how I could do the customer service wrap than I was the techie bit. So if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have maybe jumped ship to be the service management side earlier.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a bit of a thread. I feel like a lot of these stories are going to convince people to be self-employed, and I'm sad about it. I love being self-employed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not the be all and end all, and it's a baptism of fire, as you'll know, in terms of understanding. There's things that I don't think that that I know we don't teach at schools that I wish we did, because I thought tax was just a thing that happened. Turns out I have to do stuff with it. Didn't know that. And things like reading contracts. I'd read contracts for people the business I work for was working with, but I'd not actually had to read one to the extent that I have to read my own and write my own now. Just all these bits and pieces. But yeah. Should I encourage everyone to work in? Well, so long as it's not too much competition, it's fine.
Yeah. I know there's plenty of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for being self-employed, but I feel like I love being self-employed now, and I've been running my business for 12 years, but I would not have been able to do that confidently and competently without the experience that I had being self-employed. It's not so much the things that I learned in that job, but the soft skills about networking,
Yes.
communication, and all of these things that helped me to grow a business. Fresh out of university,
No.
it would have been impossible.
Yeah, I really hats off to anybody that does do it straight out of university. I don't think I would have been ready back then. Yeah, all those soft skills, exactly as you say. I feel like I'm more of a well-rounded consultant based on just shy of 20 years, or maybe longer, don't know, of being a permanent employee. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very helpful. And I got all expenses paid business trip to Washington, so I'm definitely not that off of my own business.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, definitely perks both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody was interested in learning more about service management or the technology side of your experience. What kind of advice would you give them?
I would tell them to, well, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to have a conversation at any point. Happy to talk to anybody, anywhere, at any point. And I think besides that, there's loads of resources out there. So there's a brilliant website called itsm.tools, where there's loads of information that's really palatable, reads really wonderfully, where you can get some advice on or read some information about service management. You've got places like I'm going to say the name right, hopefully, the International Institute for Learning. I've written articles for them. There's this stuff on there that you can read. But just Google's your friend. Right. There's loads of resources out there. There are best practice frameworks out there. The main one is called ITIL, where you can learn loads of stuff about that. I would start there, but I think it goes a long way to have a conversation with somebody. And I would always say, don't be afraid to reach out and just say, hey, I'm really interested in what you do. And I've had recently, actually, I've had quite a few people contact me and say, I'd love to know more about what it is you do and get your advice. And because I provide mentoring services for free, I'm more than happy to help. I think for me, it's very important to give back. And I've forgotten the other part of the question, so I'm very sorry.
You've answered it. Yeah. So if someone was interested in that role, what would you recommend? And yeah, having conversations. I imagine that's a big part of your current role. So, yeah,
Yes,
start
yes,
with the conversation.
talking to people. Definitely.
So yeah, the service management, it sounds really interesting. Is this like the kind of reminds me of the experience I had when building a website, and I wanted to kind of put all of the information that I thought people would want on the page and make it sound really cool. And then when you actually there was some app that I added that showed me what people were doing on the website, and they were like opening it, skimming to the bottom, clicking on whatever was brightly coloured, and then closing it. When you actually think about how
Yes.
people use it, it's not how you planned.
No, absolutely. There's actually just thinking about where I was saying about places to look, humanizing IT. There's a company called Hit Global, who have just recently, in the last sort of 2 years, launched a training course to talk about humanizing IT, which is how to make tech accessible and what sort of things you need to think about when you're creating a service. So I had a very similar thing when I created my website. Is I thought, oh, I can do this, I can make it look really jazzy, but then people skipped the bits that I thought were really jazzy, and they just exactly the same. They scroll to just the bit that they want. So it's kind of figuring out how you can build your service by having that customer in mind, or that end user in mind, so that you meet their needs. Easier said than done, and there's some people that are absolutely brilliant at it, and I think there is an element where it can be a bit hit and miss anyway, because it depends on what somebody's feeling like at that particular moment, as whether they're going to click the blue button or the red button, kind of like a Matrix reference there. But but yeah, I think there's a lot to be said around understanding what people actually want. I mean, if you think about things like if TikTok, I'm not an expert on TikTok by any stretch of the imagination, but if you think of the younger generation, they are used to bite-sized chunk pieces of information between 15 and 60 seconds, no more than that. So if you're doing videos on your website or something like that, you want subtitles, because my kids absolutely love things with subtitles. They very rarely actually listen to the program, they read what's happening. But it needs to be bite-sized chunks, because you've got to tailor it for your audience. But then you've also got to consider that not everybody receives information in the same way, which is where you might have a video, you might have a load of like a couple of paragraphs, or you might have an infographic just to try and draw people in. It's very difficult to cater for everybody, but service management, it does consider all of that sort of stuff, or it should do when it's done properly.
Yeah. I guess it's like the classic story of you've got your child a fancy, expensive new toy for Christmas, and you give it to them and they play with the box. Until you've actually told the customer, you have no idea what they're going to do.
Absolutely. And you've also got the thing as well, where quite often people, like if you're speaking to a customer, the customer may think that they want A, B, and C, but the more you talk to them, you realize they actually don't want that. They want X, Y, and Z instead. Or you tailor a combination of the two, because the idea at the beginning isn't necessarily what's going to give them the most amount of value in whatever it is that they're working on.
Yeah, exactly. Because they don't know what's available to them until you tell them. Perfect. It must be really interesting. That does actually sound like quite a fun job. This is every time I speak to somebody, I'm like, oh wow, your job sounds really cool.
I did forget another resource, which when you speak to a couple of my counterparts, they're going to tell me off. There's two people that are going to be on your podcast soon. The three of us, we have co-founded a community called the Women of IT Service Management. So not only encouraging people into tech anyway, but also making sure that we provide adequate support for women, because it is a male-dominated industry no matter what we do. Although we are challenging that, but it's going to be launching in July, and so there will be resources there. So that's another place to keep an eye out for.
Well, I love the sound of that. Brilliant. Thank you very much. yeah, there are some fields that just have been male dominated for a very, very long time. And yeah, it's changing
Hmm.
very slowly.
Mm.
Very helpful to have things like that. So if we went back to Sophie at school, what was your favourite subject to study at school?
Music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love to sing. I this is I'm kind of like a, not a tortured soul, but a very strange kind of mix of person. I love music. I like creative things, but I am about as creative as the mouse on my desk. Um, so I can come up with great ideas, but I can't necessarily make it happen when it comes to art and music. So I used to love music because I love to sing and I like to sing other people's stuff, but I was terrible at composing my own pieces of work. And I have a habit of learning. When I used to play the piano, I would learn the mistakes that I remembered rather than learning what the reading the music and playing it at the same time. But so music was my favorite subject. I also liked what was it called? It was called it's like graphic design, but it wasn't graphic design. They called it something else back then. I mean, we're talking like 1980s and 90s, so a long time ago. I think it was called graphic technical drawing or something like that. It was called. That was pretty cool because I wasn't really being creative, but at the same time, I could do schematics of buildings or whatever else. That was quite cool.
Yeah, I like that. We had a design tech slot in our timetable, and it would rotate each term what happened in there. So for one term, I did graphics, and I just loved that there was like rules for the drawing. It's probably the science
Mm.
brain, but I was like, I have to do everything at the right angle. This is brilliant.
Hmm. Yeah, I like working in. I think that's why I'm not necessarily great at the more creative subjects, because I like the structure, and you don't really have structure with art or music because you can do whatever you want with it. Um, Whereas when you're doing things like graphic design, you do have sort of a process to work within, or there's logic behind it, and there isn't necessarily. If you art is basically in the eye of the beholder, right? So um whereas the graphic design, if you, as an architect, if you don't follow basic principles of gravity, you're going to have a problem. So,
Yeah, I could go very wrong. Yeah, I've not thought about that for a while, but I miss my little graphics lessons. I'm definitely gonna be getting the set square out again and playing with that.
I love it.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much, Sophie. I feel like you've opened up a whole new career avenue in my brain. I hadn't really thought about the things that go into managing the tech that gets delivered and setting up systems to work for customers and for people like employees. What's the thought
Mm.
that goes into that? There's a whole new world.
Oh, I'm glad I've done that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I look forward to speaking to your colleagues. I'm sure we'll see other perspectives on the same role. But yeah, thanks for sharing those opportunities. I'll share the links that you mentioned in show notes so people that are watching or listening back can go and investigate those links now, or get in touch with Sophie if you're interested in learning more about service management.
Cool, fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This podcast would not exist without the sponsorship of Stamazing. I'm very grateful to Stamazing, not only for sponsoring our podcast, but for the brilliant work that they're doing, fostering inspiration and inclusion in STEM. I recommend having a look at their website, stamazing.co.uk, which is what you can see right now, to see a bit more about the work that they do. Alongside the award-winning Inspiration Academy, bringing events into primary schools and inspiring young people to see their future in STEM, because you can't be what you can't see. There's a fantastic membership, which I'm a part of, for women in STEM to do more of this, fostering inspiration and inclusion in STEM, with monthly content shared on empowerment, inspiration, and community. That will help you to be a better role model and mentor to people in STEM. And finally, there's a brilliant library here of role models in STEM that you can go and have a look at and hear more about their STEM stories. Here's a shout out for our sponsor, Navigated Tutor. If you haven't seen this, I recommend having a look. If you're in education, the Navigated Tutor platform gives access to a quarterly webinar and magazine and training resources. The first one I've already read and attended, and in minutes learned lots that's going to make a massive impact on the way that I support my students. This is brought to you by Arthur Moore, who is not only a fantastic tutor but also the host of the Tea and Teaching podcast and Tutoring Tips podcast, two of my most listened podcasts. So I recommend that you go and check those out if you're working in education at all, and sign yourself up to the Navigated Tutor platform for some fantastic CPD. You can get access to this at mooreedu.thinkific.com. That's mooreedu.thinkific.com.